Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and today is a live stream. In the past few weeks, you've seen some Q&As, but they were previously recorded. Today, we are actually here, so you can submit questions, and we will endeavor to answer them. So, Metta, let's have the first question.
Yes, Ajahn. Good morning. The first question today is from Holly from New Jersey in the United States. I have been struggling with what Ajahn Geoff calls, quote, the mind's ostinato. That is, the tendency of my mind to ruminate about what's next. I have been better able to concentrate on accomplishing goals, but rather than acknowledge my skillful behavior, my mind frantically worries about what to do next. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with this?
You need to contemplate in a quiet hour if the energies of worry actually produce better plans than the energies of serenity. Now, one thing I advise a lot of people is never think at night, never think after 10 p.m. Between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Do not think. So people wake up in the middle of the night, 1 in the morning, and they're anticipating something, they're worrying about something, a situation, they try to think of solutions, but your mind is only working at half speed at that time. You've lost about 30 IQ points at 2 o'clock in the morning. And as you see that quite often the problems that you're trying to solve at 2 in the morning, actually at 9 a.m. after you've had coffee and breakfast, don't seem like difficult problems at all. So your brain, your mind only works at its optimum in certain hours of the day. And when you're fully awake, have had enough food, etc., and you're in a relaxed situation, that's the time to think. And that's also the time to write things down as well. Have a book where you make your plans. Because what happens is, now you use the word ostinato. No, Ajahn Thanissaro used the word ostinato. So that's a musical term where a certain phrase of music, usually in the bass, repeats itself over and over and over, sort of a heavy percussive sound. That kind of thinking is a waste of mind. To repeat over and over plans is a waste of your mind space. So what you have to do is figure out what your best, most alert, lucid hour in the day is. And at that time, use it for making plans. And have your special plan book, where you write it down or you type it, whatever it is, so that you understand that you've already made this plan and in the best mind possible. And that, because if you don't write it down, your mind will replan plans you've already made. It will redo the plan, and that's just a waste of time. So you want to, when you want to make your plans at the height of your clarity, and you want to write them down. And you can even force yourself to do that. So every single day for half an hour, you have to make plans. And you will soon exhaust the possibilities of your life. You can make a day plan, a week plan, a month plan, a year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a life plan. And fill it in, force yourself to write it down, and you will soon get sick of planning. You will have a nice book with plans developed from the best of you. And your mind will have a sense that you have taken care of business. It has been done with the best possible information at the best time in your most lucid moments, and it has been recorded. So your mind perhaps is worried about, that you've forgotten something, etc. So it keeps repeating, going over these things. So you have to relieve it of these type of repetitive processes, the ostinatos. So that's, and I give this advice quite often for people. They're in meditation retreats. They come and they confess they've been planning. I say, well, yeah, it's all right. The idea of that the Buddha didn't plan or that an enlightened person doesn't plan is a wrong idea. The Buddha was probably the greatest planner on the planet. The planet, get it? So he planned the future for thousands of years. He recalled the past for universes, 100,000 universes into the past. He projected into the future. So, but it wasn't weighing on his mind. And the only time and he gave, again, the nature of the plans don't take long if you're in a lucid condition. He talked about how long are the processes for his planning or understanding. He said is about the same time it takes for a strong man to stretch out his arm. That's about how long it takes. So good ideas come to you. And by the way, how do you get a good idea? Do you get it by insisting that you get a good idea, or does it just arise? Have the good ideas, have the plans in your life? Do you plan to make a plan? Because if you plan to make a plan, you must plan to make a plan to make a plan. And then you must plan to make a plan to make a plan to make a plan. Or do plans arise spontaneously? They do. So all you can do is provide the optimal conditions for a good plan to arise spontaneously. And that thought scares some people, that their plans arise spontaneously. Because, of course, you get a plan and then you cancel the plan, don't you? And you cancel the plan spontaneously. And then another plan comes up spontaneously. So actually, you are living a spontaneous life. No matter how much you think you're planning your life is spontaneous. Spontaneous plans arrive. Spontaneous plans are canceled. Spontaneous plans are modified. So all you can do is optimize the clarity, happiness of your consciousness. And that mind, which is considerate of your well-being and considerate of the well-beings of others, will make the plans. So that's what you want to do, is not worry about the exact ideas or anything like that. Ask yourself, the emotional center, am I in a state of goodwill for myself, for others? Because that is the one who makes the plans. So you just arrange the emotional condition for the arising of good plans. Because you can't actually plan to make the plan to make the plan, so just forget that. But you can arrange the emotions which make good plans. So that's how you do it. Next question.
The next question is from the live chat from Kolja in Belgium. Can faith as the first faculty be linked not only to the five powers, but also to right view of the eightfold path?
Yes. Quite often in the West, Buddhism is offered as a kind of philosophy or religion free of the requirement of faith and so forth. But actually, if you look at the suttas, what the Buddha talked about, faith is an important factor. What is faith? Faith is the realization that you can't know everything before you make a move. So in our educational system, you go to university, you study philosophy, you'll come out the other side of philosophy with no commitment to any particular philosophy. You'll just have examined a lot of things. So this is called skepticism. And skepticism is a characteristic of the wisdom faculty. And it is very unsatisfactory in itself. Skepticism cannot make a move, can't make a commitment to anything. Faith, on the other hand, is the opposite. It is something that hasn't examined it necessarily, hasn't fully found knowledge, but is willing to make a commitment or a move in certain directions. And the Buddha said, when faith goes off the track, it just becomes naive gullibility. When wisdom goes off the track, it becomes fixed skepticism. And both of those are a very uncomfortable and suffering way to live. So faith has to be reasoned conviction, some sort of basic information, and then a willingness to make a move, to commit to it, to try it. Wisdom, though, keeps functioning in the background, examining, inquiring, but that doesn't mean that you don't make a move. So if you're lost in the forest and you just don't know where to go, because you're not thoroughly convinced of that you know the way out, if you sit there, you will die. So you have to make a move, and the move has to be based on the best of your understanding of the situation. But you can't just sit there and doubt every possibility, because you will starve to death. And in the meantime, it will be an unpleasant starving to death as well. But you can't just run in any direction. So the Boy Scout manual, which has some wisdom in it, tells you when you're lost in the woods, young man, the first thing you do is sit down and calm down. And once you're calm, then you evaluate the situation. But it doesn't tell you to sit there forever. It tells you to evaluate the situation before you run in panic and get yourself further lost. So this is the situation. We're actually in the situation. We should all read the Boy Scout manual, because we are in the situation. We are in a very big forest called the universe and life and everything else. And we are wandering around wondering what the best options for survival are. For not just survival, but well-being. And whether we like it or not, we can't just sit there and contemplate all the possibilities. We actually have to make a move in one direction or another. So that's what faith is, and that ties into right view. So right view is a commitment to certain types of attitudes to life. One of them is not to be committed to annihilationist view that is purely a material process which just ceases at death. That is a commitment which is not wise to make, because we can't know that by direct experience. You can't know that you cease. You can't know that anybody else ever ceased either. It's called, in the philosophy of science, it's called the impossibility of verification. It's not falsifiable. In other words, that people cease at death is not falsifiable. So this is one of the principles of logic, of philosophy of science, is that something isn't a scientific fact if it's not falsifiable. How could you falsify that? So the Buddha says, some people seem to have certainty and knowledge about before this life and after this life. Others do not. Those who do not are in a situation where they're going to have to look at some evidence, but also they're going to have to make commitments. Whether they like it or not, they're going to have to decide whether to commit to non-existence or the possibility of existence. And what are the benefits and negatives of commitment to either of those types of views? So this is right view, and this is also tied in with right faith. So the first 5 faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. These are the 5 faculties, all of which have to be developed in an individual to a certain stage for the so-called breakthrough to enlightenment. So, yeah, there's much to say about that. It's a really rich teaching, just these 5 faculties and the development of them. But we'll leave it for now. Go to the next question.
The next question from the live chat is from Yoli in Arizona, United States. Dear Ajahn Sona, when taking refuge in the Dhamma, is that the world of phenomena, ethics, or the suttas?
Refuge in the Dhamma is refuge in the core truths of what the Buddha is teaching. And the core truths are just two. So you've heard that the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, there's an end to suffering, and there's a way to the end of suffering. That's the Four Noble Truths. But actually you can reduce it to just two truths. There's suffering, there's an end to it. So it's possible to not suffer. There's lots of philosophies and religions that start out with the premise there's suffering and there's no way out. Or it's even noble or good or something like that. The Buddha's Dhamma is there's suffering, psychological suffering. Of course, there's physical suffering as well, but the psychological suffering is what we're concentrating on as something that can be overcome and eliminated. And so that's what Dhamma is this conviction and understanding about the nature of suffering, how suffering, emotional suffering arises, and how you can bring it to cessation. So that is the essence of the path, and that is right view. That's what right view is. And when you take refuge, you're taking refuge in a psychological understanding of how the mind works and a commitment to this theory of mind that it suffers for reasons. One emotionally suffers for reasons. And the causes can be understood, and the causes can be eliminated, and with that, the suffering is eliminated as well. So that is that is right view, and that is taking refuge in the Dhamma. The Dhamma is not a person or a thing or God or anything like this. Dhamma is the important truth. So lots of people are committed to truth. So there's scientific truth. You see scientists working away. They want the truth of things. They want truth of things. All kinds of people want the truth about this and that. But the Buddha says there's virtually infinite numbers of truths to be uncovered in the universe, and you don't have time to do them all. Which ones are you going to choose? Are you going to go the physics way? You're going to go to the psychological way? You're going to go to the social way? What are you going to the political way? What are you going to choose to use your time on? And he says, out of his wisdom. So this is what wisdom is. Wisdom is the capacity to sort through a lot of different options in life and choose the one that is most important. And the most important one, the Buddha says, is this issue of unnecessary suffering. That's the prime issue in life, not to suffer unnecessarily. And so how much of it is unnecessary? In fact, most of it or all of it. Yeah. So that's what we shall leave that one with. I think there's a question from Vancouver.
Yes, the next question is from Bodhi in British Columbia, Canada. After many years of practice, I have come to accept that complete enlightenment in this lifetime is not in the cards. Mostly, I have considered this as wise recognition of reality, but lately I have been wondering if there is some giving up in my attitude, so depression or apathy may be involved. How important is belief in liberation to motivate practice?
What we should do is not conclude either way. Why are we qualified to assess our own potential for enlightenment? So lots of people have ideas about themselves. They're sure they're going to get enlightened, and the other one is sure they're not going to get enlightened. And both of those types come to the Buddha, and quite often they're not qualified to assess themselves. So the Buddha says, look, you don't know what sort of causes have been put in. But the first thing that seems to be very good is that you're interested at all. most people are not that interested in this issue of enlightenment. The very fact that you're interested and that you actually try it out and so forth already means that you're in a certain, you have put in good causes in the past, otherwise you wouldn't be interested at all. So at that point we stop wondering if one can or cannot, because that's a waste of time. We're not in a position to assess it. It does, as you see some of these stories, there's a collection of stories called the Therigatha and the Therigatha. So these are the stories of enlightenment experiences from the nuns, the Theri, and the monks, the Theras. These are Thera means a senior monk. It's a person of 10 years or more, or a nun of 10 years or more. So they're telling stories of how they achieved enlightenment, and quite often, the minute before they attained enlightenment, they had no idea. In fact, had given up. It was just not working out, and they'd been at it for years. They'd become monastics. There's a nun who tells her story. She had been trying her very best for 7 years in a row, doing nothing but meditation, being a nun, and then it's not possible. She had concluded that it was simply not possible. So she decided to hang herself. She went to a tree, put the rope up, got up on a stump, put the noose around her neck, and achieved enlightenment. Just before stepping off the stump. So that's a very good story, and it's a kind of story that lots of them proceed without success, and then they blunder across. This happens in the rest of the world as well. The rest of knowledge, scientific breakthroughs and so forth, or the person's been on the wrong track, or they thought they were on the right track, and that turns out to be the wrong track. And in a moment, they understand, oh, I was on the wrong track. So, yeah. So the light flicks on. So we can't know that. All we can do is put in the causes, good causes. And that's our job. Our real job is to stop thinking about whether we can or can't, whether this is going to happen or not happen. What we do commit to is it happens for reasons. It happens for causes that have been put in. And our job is to just put in the causes, not to concern ourselves uselessly about when the results appear. So we get rid of the whole issue of, am I going to get enlightened? Maybe not. Maybe I can't. This is total waste of time. That thing should never arise. That's a new stage of spiritual practice maturity, is like abandon that thought. Only go to, I have put in good causes. So as the Dhammapada says, a jar fills drop by drop. And so the wise become brimful of knowledge. It's just keep putting drops in the bottle. That's all you do. Next.
The next question is from the chat from Ryan from the Peruvian rainforest. Dear Ajahn, are realizations of the Dhamma equivalent to what the West would call an epiphany? If so, is the process of getting into the zone when, for example, playing music or reading a book, can be recollected or replicated to generate Dhamma realizations and or wisdom? Could you please expound?
Yeah, that question might seem obscure to some, but it has some good ideas in it. An epiphany is a very interesting word. It's borrowed from Christianity. It's a moment of grace or realization, a moment of sort of a clarification about the bigger meaning of life or something like this. And it seems to just arise out of, in the oddest times. You're on a bus somewhere and you're just gazing out the window and then suddenly have an epiphany. about your relationship to your work or to your spouse or something like that. So it's a kind of a revelation of truth. So this happens in all spiritual, philosophical, even scientific areas, and it tells you something about how the mind works. The causes have been processing, putting in, and then at a time when you're not even trying, a kind of a realization arises. The other part of the question was about being in the zone, playing music or reading a book or something like that. Well, that's important. That is what's called the eighth factor of the path, samadhi. And what's the core issue of samadhi? It's wholeheartedness. We say concentration, samadhi, jhana, the eighth factor, is deep concentration. But what is the single factor in that is gives it its character, and it is unification of mind. You are wholeheartedly engaged in a single thing, and that's when flow happens. That's when that's the zone. Your mind is unified, and it is not considering other options. It's not fragmented. It's not. You're not of two minds about something. You are not experiencing lack of attention. So that we seek that out. That's the moments when we feel the best in life, is when we are wholeheartedly engaged in something. When we're a kid, playing outside, and so you can be totally engaged in your experience because you're not concerned about whether you're going to keep your job or what's for dinner or anything like that. So quite often the magic of childhood is that you can fully engage and let go of the future and the past and be totally there. And that's a good thing, but we tend to, as life starts to heap responsibilities on you, you quite often are fragmented. You have to keep thinking about the future and then thinking about the past, and you can't zone in. We seek options out of that. Drugs are one way to sort of get an experience of wholeheartedness again. Alcohol, romance, overwhelming kind of experiences like extreme sports. Just go cliff climbing without a rope. You will be wholeheartedly engaged in the experience, because if you fail to pay attention, you will die. People jump out of planes with parachutes, or all this skydiving and stuff. Why do they do that? And why do they report such a great experience? It's because it has completely caught their attention. So this is very important. So in your question, then there are those factors. There is wholehearted engagement, which it should be transferred to the pursuit of Dhamma, and that is helpful to that end. And epiphany, which means that the breakthrough it happens because enough causes have been put in. But the wholeheartedness is, you don't want to distract yourself with full engagement with music or full engagement in a book, because you want to leave the mind open to the arising of the factors that you've put in contemplating Dhamma. So the causal factors are to always, be preoccupied with this. Why am I suffering? Why am I angry? Why? There's no need to be, changing your attitude to things, catching yourself in the middle of being disappointed about something and saying, that's not reality. Changing your attitudes again and again and again, that's putting in the causes. And then an epiphany is going to arise. You suddenly feel relieved of suffering. And then you're much more likely to have an insight into that, because you have wholeheartedly committed to this, watching carefully your emotional processes, interrupting and replacing them. By the way, that's very important. This watching is not merely watching. The benefits promised of mindfulness and so forth are not the mere watching mindfulness. It is mindfulness which watches, recognizes, then draws in right effort to cancel, replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome thoughts or wholesome emotions. So there's a lot of interference, messing around with your own emotional states, canceling, not being convinced of the authenticity of your feelings, to say not regard any of them as authentic. They're all up for change, all up for dismissal, all up for replacement. There is no authentic you. And this is, people get into it, but it's the way I feel, it's truth, it's the, it's just a conditioned process of emotion structure. Replace it, change it, replace yourself. Yes. Okay, next question.
The next question is from the chat from Josiah in Utah, United States. It seems like all society runs on rewards and punishments, from child rearing, friendships, workplaces, etc. When someone disappoints or fails to cooperate, the tendency is to punish with consequences, or at least vent the frustration. This seems unwise to me. Any advice?
It has to be done carefully. See, the Buddha himself has introduced something called the Vinaya for the administration of this whole group of individuals who have decided to become monastics. And, you have this experience that the whole idea is peace and no anger and so forth, but there are consequences to actions. So if you violate certain precepts or rules, there are consequences for that action. And of course, it's not that somebody's going to shout at you. So that would be there's an attitude to correcting another monk. So the Buddha says, before you correct another monk, ask yourself these: do I speak with a heart of loving kindness? So yes, they have transgressed the rules, etc. Maybe they're deliberate, maybe they're ignoring it, maybe they've decided they're smarter than the Buddha or whatever. Are you angry in your questioning? So you should not then correct them. You should wait until you speak with a heart of goodwill. It doesn't mean that you don't correct anybody. It means that you speak with a heart of goodwill. Am I myself free from this fault? Before you go on correcting them, so you're furious about somebody leaving the door open all the time, and then you think, I leave it open too sometimes. So you better deal with your own tendencies there. So, am I free? Do I speak in accordance with the facts? So sometimes we tend to exaggerate the situation. You'll see this in courtroom trials and so forth. The defense and the prosecution attempt to spin it or emphasize the negative parts or the positive parts. What we're interested in is an impartial assessment of what actually occurred. Do I speak in accordance with the facts? So don't try to exaggerate the faults or exaggerate the positive things. So that is the questions that one asks before going ahead with this. And then one can go ahead if you're confident of what is the right type of behavior, then you can go ahead. And then you ask yourself, is that person in a hurry somewhere? Have they slept? Are they hungry? Things like that. Is this the right time? Are you in front of a whole group of strangers when you lay this behavior on somebody in the midst of a crowded restaurant? You start shouting at them about their behavior. So is it the right time and the right place for this? Are you yourself sleep deprived? Are they sleep deprived? Are they drunk at the time? There's a lot of assessment of right time, right place, correct facts of the case, free from the fault, and your emotional condition. Do I speak with a heart of loving kindness? When that happens, amazing communication can take place. But it doesn't mean that Buddhism being very a pacifistic kind of approach to life doesn't mean that we never say anything to anybody, that we never tell them the blunt facts about the situation, that their behavior or their speech is negative, that their actions are problematic. We can be very blunt about that. And sometimes they're not going to like it. And you say it whether they like it or not. So the Buddha talks about when he says things and when he does not. And the qualifications are, is it true? Is it beneficial? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? So if it's true, beneficial, and unpleasant, I say it. If it's true, beneficial, and pleasant, I say it. Doesn't matter whether it's unpleasant or pleasant, I say it, because it's true and beneficial. But if it's true and not beneficial, but pleasant, unpleasant, I don't say it. It's not beneficial. So the person, you can assess, well, it's true, but there is simple. I'm going to waste my breath, or they're going to just beat me up. They're going to shoot me. It's not appropriate. It's not. The benefit is not there. So whether it's pleasant or unpleasant is not the condition. So that's what you ask yourself. Is what I'm saying true? Is it beneficial? And whether it's unpleasant or pleasant to hear, you can go ahead and say it if it qualifies for those things. Yeah.
The next question is from Ermina from Poland. Dear Ajahn Sona, could you please explain the following sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 10.75? Quote, take a certain individual who is unethical, but they truly understand the freedom of heartdom by wisdom where that unethical conduct ceases without anything left over. And they have listened and learned and penetrated theoretically and found at least temporary freedom. When their body breaks up after death, they depart for a higher place, not a lower.
Yeah, it's the condition of consciousness at the time of death. And if one has lived an unskillful life and done all kinds of things based on ignorance, but one has awakened out of that and found knowledge and a new attitude to life, that is the condition of consciousness which arises at the time of death. And that the time of death is the last moment of this life conditions the arising of the first moment of the next life. So yeah, some people would feel it's on, if they've been on the bad end of that person's actions, they feel it's not fair. They went to heaven. But that's the nature of consciousness. If we're functioning on ignorance, basically the cause of birth is ignorance. We wouldn't be reborn. If we were fully enlightened, we wouldn't have taken birth to begin with. But so we start off with the lack of knowledge, and then we have conditioning from the society around us, the families around us, the friends around us, books and so forth. And we think in a certain way, and we act unskillfully. And later on, we find out, I was an idiot. I was foolish. I did evil because I thought that was the thing to do, etc. So. But I really do not think that way anymore. I am a totally changed person. And whether anybody likes it or not, that does free you from those past actions. It does free you. You are free from those things. You might still be in jail, because a lot of prisoners actually make the case that they're not the same person who did the crime. So let me out of jail. But society has to kind of, they're not, the justice system is not that sophisticated, so they have to, for the sake of others, they have to maintain the punishment, etc. But in terms of the laws of the universe is recognizes transformations of personality, and the person is now innocent. There are a number of cases in the time of the Buddha where people who have done very unskillful things, murder and pillage and all kinds of stuff, have had a change of heart, and the Buddha, they enter the robes sometimes, and they attain enlightenment and free from the results of this. So you can cheat your karma, by the way. It's a good thing to know how to get out of all this evil that you've done in the past. You can cancel the results by attaining enlightenment. Doesn't mean that you can go around. Now, this is where lots of rascal gurus around there saying that they're beyond good and evil. So they do all kinds of rascally things, but there's enlightenment. They're enlightened, so they're free from all of this stuff. No, that's not what the Buddha says, and that's not the way the Buddha behaved. The Buddha behaved in an extremely ethical situation. He said, person is beyond good and evil because they cannot do evil, and they don't actually receive the positive results of their good actions either, because they're not going to take rebirth. But it's not that they don't do evil, they can't do evil. So in these guru traditions where they excuse themselves by some sort of belief that they're beyond the results, they're not. They're simply ignorant, and it should be clearly understood, and they should be judged on their behavior. The enlightened person is not beyond some sort of ethical standards. Not only are they conforming to ethics, they can't not conform to ethics. They are intrinsically ethical and can't be any other way. Yeah.
The next question is from Eddie in California, United States. Dear Ajahn, I've recently received a sharp and sudden increase in my responsibilities at work and have been feeling a lot of pressure not to let people down. How can I approach this with equanimity and prevent these pressures from invading my inner life and meditative practice?
Well, you have to decide whether you can, in fact, be equanimous with your new responsibilities. And this happens with a lot of people in spiritual practice. They often take demotions. They decide their interest in succeeding or getting more responsibilities or moving up the ladder can be weakened by spiritual insights and saying, like, why do I care? Like, why do I want all these responsibilities anyway? I'd rather be meditating someplace. So you got to decide whether it really is going to intrude into your well-being and so forth. And if that's the case, then you decide, well, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not interested in further responsibilities. People do this with kids, like you stop after 2 kids, instead of just 9 kids, who can hardly handle 2. So the wise thing to do is not have more kids. So the wise thing to do is maybe not have more responsibilities. Some people, you have to question the motives. Not everybody's motives for moving up the ladder, getting more power and so forth are sensible. And quite often the people behind the scenes they're actually using you because they know people they like rewards. So there's 2 rewards. One is money. So some people respond to more money. That's why I'm going to do this. Others praise. They tell me I'm a good person, a very admirable person. So they don't really care about the money. They care about the praise. The other thing is just success. They care about confirming their own capacity to do this. And then the other option is fame. So they become more well-known to everybody. And some people will do anything for fame. They'll kill somebody for fame. They will commit an act of assassination, not for any other reason than they just want to be known to people. That's a weird thing. But others, success. They will do anything to succeed. You see these mountain climbers, they're not getting paid for this. In fact, they're paying $100,000 to climb some death peak, and without oxygen. Why? Well, some of them want fame, but the other ones just want to do it because they succeeded in doing it. These are all motives behind it. So you got to ask, what's my motive here? Why do I want this? If I'm thinking, this is going to be just a headache for me. Do I want headaches? Do I care that people admire that I've gone up the ladder, etc.? You have to question your own motives. Say, maybe you don't want to do that, And if you do that, you say, well, I'll do that, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my well-being. So I can't be worried about doing this well, and I'm sacrificing my well-being. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, but without sacrificing my well-being. And if it is the case that I can't live up to the responsibilities, then I'm perfectly willing to take a demotion or move out to another job. That's the condition. I can't sacrifice my well-being for this.
The next question is from James in Alberta, Canada. Do you think it's possible to overutilize PASSADDHI? If so, what general side effects are expected?
No. PASSADDHI is tranquil well-being, is serenity. PASSADDHI is ease and well-being. And it's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment as well. And it precedes, it tends to naturally result from the previous experience of enlightenment factors. The first one is mindfulness. Second is investigation of DHAMMA. DHAMMA being this very critical truth about suffering and its ending, why we suffer and how we can reduce that. That's investigation of DHAMMA. So your mindfulness is developing. You're aware of your inner states. You have a conviction that a lot of your distress is unnecessary and can be overcome. After that, energy arises because you're interested in the project. It energizes you. And then joy comes. You start to feel joyful. And after the joy, because you're doing some very interesting transformative work within, the results, the nice positive results is serenity. And that's the PASSADDHI. That's the 5th factor of the 7 factors of enlightenment. So this PASSADDHI is a very good sign. And if you're getting that PASSADDHI, then it means that you're putting in good causes. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting this sense of ease and serenity. What follows that, though, is you can explore more, is that the natural following of that is samadhi itself, is like a great depths of stillness of mind, profound stillness of mind. So you can explore pushing beyond mere serenity into deep stillness. And this deep stillness, by the way, is the catalyst for real, true, irreversible insights. So again, it's a valuable thing in itself, is profoundly restorative and health-giving, but it also is the foundation for arising of deep clarity and insight.
The next question from the chat is from Stephen from Maryland, United States. Dear Ajahn, I'm wondering about the relationship between sakkāya-diṭṭhi and anatta. Since the first is dropped at the sotapanna stage, does that mean that anatta is fully understood at that point?
Yeah, sakkāya-diṭṭhi, this is a Pali term. This is, diṭṭhi means view, and the sakkāya is the view about self. So this is what's dropped at the first stage of enlightenment. So most cultures, most of the religions have this whole presumption of a real self, that you are a real, solid, enduring entity. And that's where the theories about the soul and the afterlife and all of these things comes from a conviction, or it's a naive philosophical idea that there's a real me. I mean, and it's kind of natural, it's just built in, there's a real me. The one who went to sleep last night is the one that got up this morning. The one that was 10 years old is now the one that's 30 years old. Yeah, but when you investigate that, and the Buddha is investigating, he's breaking through, in a sense, he's questioning this basic intuition and philosophy, which becomes concrete in religions, and so, that there isn't such a thing. There isn't a core person. So that's the breakthrough for the first stage of enlightenment, is to question the whole soul theory. But it doesn't mean, by the way, so the opposite of, which is fairly common these days, is that there may or may not be a self, but it ends at death. You know, it just ends at death. He says that's another extreme. That is not the case, and the self also is not an eternal thing. It doesn't persist for eternity. Neither of those are the case. There's this continuous flow of events, which the body and the mind and feelings and consciousness and perception, etc. These are flowing events, and they flow from one life to another, but there's no solid self in the middle of this. So this is this helps you. Anatta is the general description of this, no self. Anatta is that there is not a self, not such a thing. This kind of thing happens in science as well. They had to explain how light could travel through space, and they had because light is a wave, it had to flow in a medium. So, you know, a wave coming in on the ocean, the wave is a wave in water, or there's a wave in air. So light, what about light? It's traveling from the sun. So it must travel through a medium, and the medium was called ether. So they had this ether. This explains how light can travel through as a wave. But eventually they discovered no, there's no ether. No, it doesn't exist. And light doesn't need a wave to travel. It doesn't need a medium to travel through. What happened to the ether? There never was any, and there never was a need for it either, because things just don't work that way. So the same with the self. This idea of the self is an unnecessary idea. To the way we think is like something moves through time, but it doesn't work that way. Just one moment affects the next moment, but there's nothing that moves through those moments. So this is what is meant by sakkāya-diṭṭhi, the right view of the nature of the self. And anatta is a general view that it's a matter of how deep your insight into this non-self is. And it admits of degrees. So at the first stage, it's not complete. Your penetration of the idea of that there isn't a real me, a continuous real me from yesterday, which will be there tomorrow, has been understood enough to make changes in you. You see things differently, you feel differently, but it is not complete. It is not thoroughly, completely, the remnants of it are not complete. You still have leftover feelings. It's like somebody gets out of jail. Every now and then they have dreams that they're back in jail, see, or old ways of thinking. People break out of old ways of thinking. They change religions, for instance, but there's remnants of the old one left, and so forth. So this is what happens with us, is that we can have partial realizations about this. Arahant, though, the fully enlightened person, has fully penetrated the illusion of self, or the necessity of a theory of a self, and so they have completed the right view. They've completed sakkāya-diṭṭhi, and are now have penetrated fully that. So it's just a matter of degree with there. That lots of people are come across. It's a good, shows you're bright that you see, wait a sec, you're supposed to see through the self in the first stage, but then you're still not free of it, etc. So that's a good need to explain that, and it's a common real confusion there. Okay, so we are at the end of our live stream, and we have returned to life. In the future, though, we will modulate back and forth. We have a whole series of talks I've given, formal meditation talks on a theme, and we want to present those, so those will also take place at times. And so sometimes we'll do the live Q&A. We have some pre-recorded Q&As that you haven't heard any of the questions or answers. So sometimes they will come up. They come up as what's called premieres. There's a difference. Live stream and premieres. So some people don't know the difference. So they ask questions during the premiere thinking that it's live, but it's not live. This one was live. Live stream, premiere, and then the Dhamma talks where there are no questions and answers options. It's just a premiere. So that's what you can look forward to in the future. But we will be regularly with you, usually on Sundays like this.